Hey there riders, Motojourno Chris here today, and I've been lucky enough to borrow Motorhub in Castle Hill in Sydney's demo GSX S1000. And this is the updated model. So for those of you who have heard of this bike in the past, basically Suzuki reintroduced one of their older GSX-R engines, kind of one of the more renowned engines, and put it in road bike trim and offered us a much more accessible and fun bike for the road. And those bikes did exceptionally well, in large part because not only were they great as an overall machine, but they were great value as well. They had a very inexpensive buy-in price, and that is reflected in the new version. These are 17.3 here in Australia on the road. I think they're like 11.3 or something ridiculous in America as well. The pricing on these for the bike you're getting is just really exceptional, particularly these days where a lot of the naked bikes and the bigger naked bikes are around that 20k to 25k mark. And while some of them do have more fancy stuff, I think this particular machine, the GSX S1000, proves that you don't need a lot of the extras. The package that you can get for this kind of money is just so good. Inline 4-cylinder, so it's got a very kind of traditional inline 4 character to it. The GSX-Rs have always been quite torquey, and that is certainly carried across with this engine. They have massively improved the fueling, better than ever before, and that was the big kind of Achilles heel of the old GSX S1000. We're getting interesting styling. I like the overall look of the bike. It's got this weird kind of like camo plastic effect on it, which is kind of cool. And the headlight, I guess, is going to be polarizing. I like the overall bike, but I could take or leave that headlight, even though the throw of lights is pretty cool. And the little wingette kind of style thing, which is, I guess, MotoGP inspired, I really do like that. I like that kind of thing. So what really stands out on the bike, apart from that exceptional power plant, is the chassis. It has got 43mm forks, it's got Brembo calipers on the front here, fully adjustable forks, rebound and I think preload adjustability on the shock, both from KYB. And the actual handling of this bike is, telepathic. It's like it's on rails, and it's quite a neutral handler as well. It just goes where you look. It's not too aggressive as far as falling on the side of the tire, but it's also not at all resistant getting out onto the side of the tire. So Sports Max 2 tires, I believe, are fitted to this. I really liked the grip and the feel of the tire. Not too aggressive a tire, ideal in the road, and the stability out on the side of the tire was exceptional. Obviously, being able to move around on the bike very easily did help me at times kind of reduce the amount of lean angle I was carrying through the corners, but the handling on this bike was an absolute standout. Moving back, of course, we have that power plant. Now, what they've done is they've actually revised it quite significantly, and I would say I went with mainly B mode, and the fueling is exceptional. It's not quite as instant as A mode, and it's a little bit more restrained, but the smoothness factor in B mode to me just was a huge advantage over running the slightly higher performance A mode. And for around towning, it's got a nice bit of torque down low. It's not extreme by any means, but then when you rev it hard, you get just this beautiful top end. It's absolutely exceptional. And it did mean that I mainly used second and third gear so that I could use as much of that top end as possible, because it was just so much fun. And you do need that higher spec Brembo brake setup to slow the bike down, because you will be having a heap of fun. Most of the noise, most of the exhaust note is actually intake growl from this bike, and as you rev it hard, it is absolutely exceptional. It is a beautiful, beautiful engine note that comes out of this, which accompanies that staggering amount of torque and performance, which is just so accessible. And that does mean that while the exhaust is quite an attractive looking exhaust and it's well hidden away as far as the collectors and everything like that, you're really benefiting from the way they've designed the engine to give you a real great aural feel to the bike, which eggs you on and is super rewarding when you're riding that bit harder. Now, I wouldn't have minded a little bit more bite from those front Brembo brakes. There's really staggering amounts of power, but you do need to use a bit more force through the lever to access that. And the feel is good, the modulation is good. Transitioning on and off the brakes, kind of, if you've trailed them into the corner, is exceptionally easy, and you will be using a lot of brake on this bike because you'll be accelerating a lot as well. Just that, like I said, the engine eggs you on, and it is very, very well tuned, particularly for that B mode, and you will want to rev it out. You will want to have as much fun as you can on this bike. Probably not the best thing for your license, but as far as having fun on the machine, exceptional. There's a quick shifter, up and down quick shifter, which worked exceptionally well. I felt like when it wasn't quite in maybe the ideal operating range, it was a little bit clunky. The upshifts, when you're in a good operating range, I had to check that I'd actually made them. They were that smooth. The downshifts, there's a little bit of a punch because it auto blips, but beautiful, beautiful, really just so refined, like the engine, unlike the handling. The level of refinement and smoothness in those areas was just really quite staggering. Back to the brakes really well supported on the brakes, particularly on the front end, because you will be using quite a bit of brake to pull up the bike because you can just pick up so much speed so quickly. That rear single Nissin caliper, a little bit more basic, but at the same time, you're mainly using that for control through the corners or for stopping in low speed in, city or suburban conditions. So a nice setup, I would say. The rear suspension was the suspension which got kind of the most upset on the rougher roads. But as I said, because the overall chassis package is so good and so confidence inspiring, it really wasn't a concern. I'd perhaps play around with that rebound a little bit to try and maybe slow that down or soften that up a little bit. But realistically speaking, for a sporty suspension setup that is awesome fun in really mixed conditions, so all kinds of road conditions, this thing was really well set up for me, and really not far off what I would say is probably kind of the perfect setup for me and for what I'm looking for, particularly considering the pure price range of this bike. So I'll very quickly cover the ergonomics on the GSX S1000. I will have a full video out on this particular area with a little bit more depth in it. I'm 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam. 810 seat height makes it a very easy bike to jump onto for me, but also ideally I would say for most people, 810 isn't that tall. It's fairly narrow between the legs, but it's got quite a bulbous and large tank here, which gets very, very wide. And so grabbing onto the tank with both legs, you might find that's on the wider side of things. So as you can see, while it's not a sports bike kind of seat to peg ratio, it is still a fairly engaged seat to peg ratio with more of a stretch towards those bars, which have been brought a little bit back towards the rider, but it gives you a nice upright seating position. And I did find myself really getting into it and kind of getting my weight a little bit lower on the bike and really getting in there as far as when I was going through the twisties, but nice and upright. Good vision of the dash, good vision in front of you, great vision through the mirrors. A very easy bike to jump onto as far as comfort and being quite a relaxed overall bike. And obviously the advantage of a naked bike over a sports bike is that you feel the speed a lot quicker. It's a bit more engaging at lower speeds as well. And as a result, you can have a lot more fun on a bike like this at lower speeds and really feel like you're having a bit of a go. Whereas on a super sport or a super bike, you might find yourself really going to quite extreme levels to get that same level of feeling. What I should mention actually is also that moving around on the bike was very easy. So moving off the seat and around on the bike as far as kind of the cornering was just very, very natural, which I don't always find is the case, as was locking in between the peg and the tank on one side of the bike when I was kind of offset off the bike. So really good in that regard. As far as electronics, the main kind of features, I guess I would say, is the 3 different ride modes. B mode is definitely my mode of choice, as I mentioned when I was talking about kind of the way it's fueled and just preferring it and being imminently the smoothest of the fueling settings and the maps. And as a result of that, I felt like that combined with kind of the smooth handling and the, really just beautiful overall package made it the most rewarding mode to be in. Traction control, you've got 5 settings. I just left it in the middle setting and I never had any issues as far as the traction control really coming into play, despite it being quite wet and sometimes slippery on the roads today. I guess if we're going to talk about things that the bike is lacking, it doesn't have a TFT display, no radial master cylinder. There's a couple of more limited kind of factors on this bike, but that's what you'd expect when you're paying, you know, $17,300 for the bike on the road, as compared to significantly more expensive machines which are over $20,000 or even $25,000. However, with that said, you do still get fully adjustable forks, an almost fully adjustable shock. You're getting the quick shifter up and down, which is very, very nice to see. And I would say that the overall package is much more than the sum of its parts. This is again one of those bikes which on the spec sheet in modern day is gonna look, you know, a little bit lacking compared to the competition. However, the overall package is absolutely exceptional. And I can't say enough nice things about it because again, I think it's one of those bikes which is just a little bit special and you'd have to ride one to really appreciate that. Because to me, as beautiful as that engine was, which really is exceptional, I think the chassis and the handling on this was as much of a standout to me, and that is high praise indeed, I guess. And particularly as I'm someone who normally prefers the smaller capacity bikes because I'd rather ride a small bike hard and have a bit more fun on the road, I still felt like I could have way more fun than should be possible on a bike like this without really just going crazy. So in that regard, I just think it's an exceptional bike, and particularly for the price. For the price, this thing is insane. It is so good. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of them on the road. I don't know whether the styling will be a little bit of a turn off, but I personally think while the headlight's a bit the overall styling of the bike is a big improvement on the old GSX S1000, and I do really like it overall. And really, I've just been blown away by how good it is. Anyway, if you're interested in this bike and you're in Sydney, test one out at Motorhub in Castle Hill. I do really recommend it. I've just had so much fun on this bike, and I have a lot of fun on almost everything I ride, but this has been quite the standout for whatever reason. I think, as I said, just that combination of all those factors has made for an excellent, excellent overall bike that's just that little bit special. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Would you buy a GSX S1000, or is there something else that you're considering as, you know, strong competition for this machine? Let me know. As always, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.